Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to JunkLuggers TV. That is right. It's the first ever JunkLuggers podcast. We have a very special treat for you, as it is our Lunch and Learn series by JunkLuggers, and you can check us out on Instagram at JunkLuggersNJ. So without any further ado, our host for the evening for our Lunch and Learn, Jean Marie.
Well, thank you, Doug. So
Absolutely.
welcome, everybody. Happy first day of summer. My name is Jean Marie Herron, and I am the Business Development Manager for the JunkLuggers of Northern New Jersey and Lower Hudson Valley. And this is our monthly Lunch and Learn. Normally, we do a different platform. We do Zoom, but I have to thank you, Doug, from Undefeated Media for encouraging me to have this podcast. So, the whole point of our Lunch and Learn is to bring an educational topic. And sometimes I have guests. So I'm thrilled to be welcoming Kristen Canty today of Donahue, O'Connell, and Riley. And they specialize in estate tax and elder law. So I've actually known Kristen for a long time. We met 20 years ago when our kids went to nursery school together, and recently reconnected as empty nesters in a networking group. And she likes to say she helps plan today for a simpler tomorrow. And she was my guest blogger last month in the JunkLuggers e-zine, and she wrote a wonderful article on the 4 vital documents that everyone should have any day and at the ready. So we're going to go over those 4 vital documents today and share, and hopefully our audience will learn lots. So Kristen, why don't you tell us what those 4 documents are, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks for having me today. And yes, the 4 vital documents that everybody wants to have at the ready are a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy designation, a living will, and a last will and testament.
Awesome. So thank you for sharing those. And I wanted to mention that, what is a junk removal company doing with an attorney in a podcast? And I like to think that at the JunkLuggers, we're always helping people declutter their spaces, especially from a sustainable and charitable fashion, getting their spaces in order. And Kristen really helps people get their papers in order. So together, our 2 companies are very synergistic in helping people find the freedom and the value. So let's go a little deeper into each of these documents, a little bit more about what they are and why it's important to have one. So let's start with the power of attorney. Why do I need to have one? And what if I don't?
Right. Sure. So with the 4 documents that we're talking about today, the reason that you want to have all of them in place is because you never know when an unexpected event is going to happen that could leave you either with no capacity or with diminished capacity. So you're really planning for an emergency, which of course we never know when that's going to happen, which is why you want to be proactive and get these documents in place as soon as possible. The first one, the power of attorney, is a document where you name another person called your agent who can make financial decisions for you. It could be anything from a person who can go to the bank and write checks and pay bills to someone who could buy and sell real estate or otherwise manage your investments. I want to stress that you are not giving up any autonomy by putting a power of attorney in place. As long as you are competent, you are making all of your own decisions. But it's so important to have the power of attorney in the event that you become incapacitated and you can't make decisions. You want someone who can seamlessly step in and be able to manage your affairs. If you don't have a power of attorney in place and something happens, then your loved ones would have to go to a court and have a guardian appointed to act on your behalf. And of course, that's going to be a more expensive and time consuming process than simply putting a power of attorney in place.
That was great. Thank you for that information. So, más importante. And how about the healthcare proxy designation?
Okay, so where the power of attorney is for financial decisions, a healthcare proxy designation is naming a person who can make healthcare decisions for you if you are unable to communicate. Again, you're not giving up any autonomy by putting a proxy designation in place. As long as you can communicate, even if it's non-verbally, you're still making all of your own healthcare decisions. But what happens if you are unable to communicate? You want to name someone you trust who can then communicate for you and decide what course of treatment are we going to pursue.
Great, great. And similarly, the living will or advance directive.
Okay, so a living will is where you then give instructions to your healthcare agent about how you would want medical decisions handled. Would you want life sustaining treatment, or would you want to refuse treatment under certain circumstances? And so the living will is crucial because it expresses your wishes, in certain events and communicates that to your healthcare proxy as well as to doctors and hospitals and courts and so on.
As you were talking about the last two vital documents, I was thinking one of my 21-year-old son who was away in Florida and had to go, into a hospital situation. I could not get any information whatsoever. So that was an expensive airplane trip, but everything's fine. And
I'm
then,
sure very nerve-wracking as well.
yes, but now I realize I should be going and getting those documents in place, even though he's only 21 and, young and single and healthy. It's still very important when when emergencies come up. My other thought was my grandmother, who was in her 90s, and her health was failing, and she had something called a do not resuscitate that they were talking about in the hospital. And she passed and they actually resuscitated her. But I guess what I'm wondering, if, they had the document, would that have been prevented?
Sure. So I like to explain to our clients that a do not resuscitate or a do not intubate, most people are familiar with that. And that's a document that a person signs when they go into a hospital or when they go into a nursing home. And a do not resuscitate only pertains to that one stay in the hospital. It's an agreement between the patient and the doctors that if things don't go well, you do not want to be resuscitated. A living will is a bit broader, and it would cover a situation where what if you show up at the hospital and you're already incapacitated and you're not able to sign a do not resuscitate? How do you get your wishes honored? And the way you do it is by having a healthcare proxy in place that states who can communicate for you, and then making sure that healthcare proxy has seen your living will so they can present it to the doctor and say, hey, actually, my grandmother didn't want to be resuscitated. Please take her off the machines.
Right, right. Fantastic. And then our last document, which of course is the will, or what everybody knows as the will. So I want to talk about what that is, where it should be kept, original versus copy, and then maybe at what point when we should get one.
Sure.
Real quick, too, we want to remind you guys that we are live. So if you at home have a question, comment, concern, you can put it in the comments section and we can answer it live with you today.
Okay, thank you. Right. So the last will and testament is a document where you put your wishes in writing and you designate a person who will be able to manage your affairs after you pass away, as well as naming the people that you want to receive everything you own, from real estate to, tangible personal property, personal possessions to, bank accounts and investment accounts. Um, a will is so important. Well, I want to break the myth that if you don't have a will in place, that everything you own will go to the state. That's not true. Every state has a law in place that says who will inherit your possessions if you don't put your wishes in writing. But that may not be the people that you want to inherit your possessions. So, a way to be more proactive is to put a will in place. And a will also allows you to think about things like, contingency plans. What happens if the initial people that you want to take are also involved in a common accident or disaster? And also, what are the tax consequences to the decisions that you're making? So a will covers all of that, and it's a way for you to be more proactive and take control of what will happen upon your passing rather than letting the state decide for you.
That's great. And the original versus a copy, who should actually have the original?
Okay. So to kind of answer that with regard to all of these documents, um, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, it's often okay to have an original and then to make copies and give out copies to doctors or to banks and those kinds of things. So we'll often do those documents in duplicate originals so that the client can have an original and then we hold an original at our office. A last will and testament, there's only one original. Uh, because you need to submit the original will to the court in order to have it enforced. It varies from state to state as to whether or not the court would accept a copy. It really depends on why you're submitting the copy and what happened to the original. But the reason that we don't do duplicate originals on a last will and testament is because one way to revoke a will is to destroy it. And again, it varies from state to state. In some states, if the original cannot be found, the assumption is the testator, the person who wrote the will, intended to destroy it. And so a copy will not be honored. In other states, the assumption is, "Oh, it's okay, we'll accept the copy, unless someone can prove that it was intended to be destroyed." So for the most part, you need an original last will and testament. And if you're not submitting the last will and testament, you have to have a really good reason and explanation as to why you're submitting a copy.
Okay, that was great. And where should somebody keep their documents?
Yeah. So, what we recommend is that you take your power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, put all those documents together in a binder and keep it somewhere that is readily accessible, easy to find, so that if there is an emergency, your family can, just grab that binder and they'll have all the information they need. As far as the will goes, we typically give our clients a copy of the will, but we hold the original will for them. That's really the safest place, because the attorney's office will hold the will in a fireproof safe. And if the family needs it, they can simply contact the attorney's office and get access to it. We don't recommend that you store any of these documents in a safe deposit box or in a safe that no one knows the combination to,
Yep.
because you just won't be able to access the documents in an emergency.
Right, right. And tell a trusted loved one, because I've seen situations, I'm sure you have too, where somebody passes unexpectedly and nobody knows where the documents are.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why we give our clients, we actually give them a little card that says, a business sized card that they can keep in their wallet that says, "I have documents on file with Donahue, O'Connell, and Riley. So in an emergency, contact my attorneys
Ooh.
and they can get you the information that you need." But I joke with clients about this binder. You don't necessarily need to keep it on your coffee table, but maybe just keep it. I used to say when cookbooks were still a thing, like, keep it with your cookbooks because the family will be able to find it there. Keep it in your study, keep it in wherever you're keeping other important papers. Don't hide it.
Yeah.
Don't make it inaccessible.
Yeah, that's great. Nobody's allowed to come into my house after this podcast, but mine is, if I get hit by a bus file. Yeah, so important. And then, do you recommend at certain stages making sure it stays updated, and at any point in time changing it? And at what point should everybody have one?
Yeah, so absolutely. The documents that we talked about today, once you're over age 18, you should start putting a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy in place. Maybe not the living will at that young an age, um, and maybe not a will because maybe you haven't accrued enough yet. But start young to get those in place and name people who can help you in the event of an emergency. And then probably you're going to want to update the documents or at least look at them every 3 to 5 years. Or if there's a major life event, such
Mm.
as a marriage, a divorce, birth of a child, if you get a new job and your financial situation changes dramatically, if you retire, if you move to a different state, because every state is going to have slightly different laws. And as far as the power of attorney and healthcare proxy go, every state prefers to see their own document. That way they don't have to question whether or not it was validly executed. How many witnesses did you need?
Mhm.
So every state likes to see their own documents. So if you move, I always suggest going to updating those documents, speaking with an attorney to make sure that what you have is compliant with the laws of the state that you're living in.
That's great. So, what I learned is start young, kind of like investing.
Mhm.
And I always say in the decluttering world, if not now, when? Start as soon as possible, as you know about that downsize or whatever you're going to do. So, what are other very important documents besides the four that we spoke of that people should definitely have on hand and in that binder or in that file?
Sure. Some of the biggest things we see that cause an estate administration to be more complicated is because people don't have their paperwork organized. So, other things you want to add to this, hit by a bus binder, would be a list of all of your assets. Even if you don't put the actual bank account number, what banks are you working with so that your family doesn't have to go on a scavenger hunt to try to figure out where your assets are? Um, Beneficiary designation forms. This is a huge one. Make sure you have a copy of any beneficiary designation form on a life insurance policy, on a retirement account, an IRA, a 401k. I can't tell you how many times we see that those documents are missing. The company has no record of it. And then we have to go through a more expensive estate proceeding because the client lost those documents. So,
Mhm.
beneficiary designation forms. Um,
We have a question.
oh,
Are you
okay.
ready?
Yeah, go
You
ahead.
ready for a question? Live from Deborah on Facebook. She says, my husband and I's will are about 12 years old, but nothing really has changed except for all of our children are over 18. Does that will need to be updated?
So, yes, I'm hearing a couple of different life events that have happened. One, your children went from being minors to being over the age of majority. You no longer need to name a guardian for them, but you may want to make sure if they're young adults that their money is held in trust in the event that they inherit at a young age. Uh, Also, in the past 12 years, there have been a lot of changes to the tax law and to the estate tax. So, depending on what state you live in, the will may be current or it may be outdated. So, major changes in the tax law are always reasons to take a look at your will, your documents.
Awesome. And I'm sure if they have any more questions like that, they should reach out to you, right?
Absolutely.
At Pearl River at docrlaw.com. So thank you, Deborah. And you guys are also welcome. Anyone watching are welcome to put a question in the comment section and we can answer it live with you today.
Okay.
And I just want to continue a couple other things that are documents that are important to keep in this binder. All right, so we said beneficiary designation forms. If you still have stock certificates, that is a great thing to add to this binder. Things like a birth certificate, marriage certificates, your social security card, your health insurance cards. Make sure those are readily available. In an emergency, people are going to need those documents in order to act on your behalf. We go through a few other things like funeral and burial arrangements
Mhm.
and a list of service providers who work on your home, such as,
Great.
cleaning ladies, or cleaning people, uh, gardeners, snow removal, electricians, plumber, any of that. Keep that list.
Yeah.
Uh, as well as any other information that you think would be helpful to your agent. But really treat that binder as if there is an emergency, here's all the information you know to take over and manage my life, and I trust you to do so.
Yeah, that's a great word picture. Being able to visualize that binder and everything, if you had to say to yourself, even if you do this like at the holiday time once a year, just go through the binder, update it. Has anything changed in my life? Oh, you know what? My grandmother left me $200,000. I also love to take everything that's in our wallets out and copy it back and forth because a lot of times we carry important things in our wallets. So I think, getting into a routine or creating a habit to update these documents, once a year is fantastic, but if not once a year, at least once every 5 years. Um, So that was terrific. Did you have more tips on the other documents, or are you good?
Uh no, that's pretty much the list of what we include. But I definitely organize, or I definitely encourage people to keep track of their own information, because I can't tell you how many times we go to the in financial institution and they say, like, we have no record of
Right.
this, or it
Right.
happens all the time, and that just makes things more costly,
Yeah.
and more time consuming for other people to be able to manage your affairs.
Yeah, and I bet you the online presence is also tricky these days, out in the cloud, et cetera. So having that information about where things are online is probably also really important to put in the binder. And even, telling that trusted loved one, having that list, I'll call it the cloud list,
Hmm.
should something happen.
That's a good point. Yeah, you should let this binder be the one place that
Yep.
you actually write down your usernames and passwords to things like your email accounts,
Right.
your social networking accounts, and cryptocurrency. That's a big thing now. I don't know too much about it, but I do know if you don't have the code to your cryptocurrency, it's like cash. If you don't have the code, it's lost, it's gone forever. So make sure you have that in a space where somebody knows how to get it and retrieve that currency.
Right. That's great. I'm sure you see in your line of work, as I do in mine, um, some crisis situations that happen when people pass, whether it has to do with, their home, their business, their paperwork. And I personally can't stress the importance of making sure these documents are there and they're in place. A personal story I'd like to share, because I would never want to see this happen to anybody else. I actually lost my dad at 19, but prior to losing him, he had remarried to a wonderful woman named Debbie, and the wills were set for when she passed that she would be buried along with my father in a plot here in New Jersey. So decades went by, and my dad was gone for a long time, and she went into a long-term relationship with a gentleman out west, and he was, they were together, and she passed away unexpectedly. And when he heard that her wishes were to be buried with her husband here in New Jersey, it was just a really terrible situation where they had to, open up the graveyard here, and she had to be flown here. It was just, and these things happen and they
Mm,
don't have to happen. So if people really take the time to reach out to somebody like you, then what they can do is get this all in order, and it's one less thing to worry about. And I always say to people, try to do things while you can, while you have your senses, if you will, before our bodies really mature to the point where, physically and emotionally, we can't make these decisions.
yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to reiterate that. We do have a few more minutes, just a couple. If anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to take them. Anybody out there, Doug?
Yeah, so please put it in the comment section. We can answer it live. A question, comment, or concern. This is your last chance to be on the JunkLuggers North Jersey podcast. But a lot of great stuff, a lot of stuff that we're learning. While the people are getting in their questions, I'll throw one at you as well. Some companies we work with, they'll give out little grab bags and free gifts. And one of the mortgage companies we work with, they were giving out fireproof folders so you could put these important documents.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if that's a good idea or that's something we want to talk about, but maybe these things should be in a safe. Maybe not like a safe that no one knows the code, but maybe something safe as in they're fireproof, and no matter what happens, these documents are safe and sound.
Well, that's a really good point. I've actually never seen these fireproof folders, so I
Yeah.
would love to see them.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, to the extent that you can protect the documents to make sure that they're not, accidentally destroyed, that's a great idea, as long as it's not locked. And like I said, I mean, what we do for our clients is we do duplicate originals, so
Mhm.
that if something does happen to their set, they can contact us, and we have an additional set for them. Um, I also, you had said something earlier that I wanted to bring up, but now I don't remember exactly what it is. But I would say, um, you can never plan too soon.
Mhm.
There's no such thing.
Mhm.
And you really are just making life easier for
Yeah.
your loved ones and, for your family, so that they don't have to go on a crazy scavenger hunt when you pass away to try to piece things together. I mean, sometimes I have clients asking me, like, how am I going to know what dad owned? And we're literally having to say, like, well, collect the mail. And now with so much being online,
Yeah.
that's not so easy to do. So
Yeah.
it can be very difficult to try to track down what a person owns if they haven't, organized it for you. So
Right.
never too soon to get these kinds of things organized. And yeah, absolutely look at it every 3 to 5 years just to make sure everything is current.
We have another question from Connor. Connor asks, can a junk removal company be a good resource for a state attorney like yourself?
Uh,
So who's going to answer that, me or you? Because
so yes, because um well, very often when a family is now cleaning out a home or a space that for a loved one who's passed away, or even for a loved one who's maybe moving out of their home and going to a assisted living facility,
Mhm.
or just downsizing, I think there's a lot of things that need to be removed and the next generation doesn't necessarily want. So um, we work quite frequently with junk removal companies.
And I did just want to mention, now that there's that little plug, that one of the things that really makes us different at the Junk Luggers is the fact that we try very hard to donate first, recycle second, and then and only then head to the landfill. So, especially in a state situation where there's already tons and tons of heartstrings being pulled in general, I think it makes people feel really good that they know that we're going to try to get the furniture to Habitat. We're going to try to get the clothing to breast cancer. We're going to get that wheelchair or walker to the 9/11 fund. And even give donation receipts. So, like I said, it sounds funny, an attorney and a business development manager for the Junk Luggers, but we really do have a lot of synergies. And it's not about removing junk and it's not about writing vital documents. It's how can we help people make their lives more simple, get them organized so that they feel the freedom to go out and do what they love because they're not worried about what the needs to be done back at the estate or what paperwork need to be signed. So this was a great podcast.
Absolutely.
So we're just about coming to an end, but if are there any more questions or should
I
we
think
close?
that's it. Last chance if you want to put it. I'll ask one, crazy fun question. Let's just say, I'm talking about a friend, totally not me, but you have a crazy family members. is is what is in the will set in stone? So like, let's say some of this stuff doesn't make sense, like the situation where she had to be flown into New Jersey. If it doesn't make sense, are these things adjusted or what's in the will is set in stone?
What's in the will is pretty much set in stone. I mean, that it's
All
literally
right.
called your last will and testament, right? So
Yes.
it's your written document of how you want things handled and who you want to receive what, which is
Gotcha.
why it's important to update it. If 20 years have gone by, it may no longer be reflective of what you really want.
What if it's not possible?
Wills can be challenged. Well,
Okay.
there are certain,
Like spread my ashes on the Empire State Building on a helicopter. Like maybe that's not possible. What
yeah.
happens then?
Yeah, then the family has to just do their best to try to honor your wishes, and sometimes you have to improvise a little bit. Spreading ashes is a whole nother topic for a different podcast. But what was I going to say? That
Set
the
in
will
stone.
the will is set in stone, and there are certain people who have the authority to challenge a will, but you don't challenge a will just because you don't like what you received. Like, that's not reason. You have to literally prove that the testator was not of sound mind, did not understand what he or she was signing, um, or was unduly influenced. And that literally means like somebody had a gun to their head and was saying, like, sign this will or else, we're going to kill you. So the will is pretty much set in stone.
Well, that was a good statement to end on. So I think Doug is going to put our contact information up.
Yes.
And that'll give you our email and I think our phone number. But
Absolutely.
Kristen and I would very much like to thank you for coming to this month's Lunch and Learn. And I look forward to seeing you next month. I'm not sure the topic just yet, but we hope you learned something. We're very friendly. We don't bite. We are professionals who return phone calls and emails. So feel free, if you think of another question, to reach out to either one of us and ask. So again, happy first day of summer, and thank you for joining us.
Yes, so real quick before Pass plays the music, you can put a question. We're going to be monitoring this. You can put a question right here on the video. This video stays up forever. But if you'd like to ask Jean Marie a question, her email is jeanmarie.herron@junkluggers.com. And if you'd like to get in contact with Kristen, her is pearlriver@docrlaw.com. And, if you want to learn nice little tips like these, we're going to be pulling out some clips of this for Instagram. You can check out JunkLuggers NJ at JunkLuggers NJ on Instagram. And yes, thank you guys for coming in. It was great stuff.
Thanks for having us in your studio.
Thanks for having me, Jean Marie.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you next time on JunkLuggers TV.